Hello, welcome to the November 4th, 2022 Club Cubase live stream. My name is Greg Undo, and I'm the host, and I'm going to do just a quick.
Hello, welcome to the November
Sorry, let
4th,
me just.
2022 Club Cubase live stream.
Sounds like my
My name is
monitoring
Greg
computer is
Undo.
fine, so I won't have to do my audio check. But I'm going to. So my name is Greg Undo. I work as a product specialist for Yamaha Corporation of America, primarily focusing on Steinberg products. I'm the host for the live stream today. I'm presenting from outside of Washington, D.C. area in Alexandria, Virginia. And if you're watching this live, please feel free to go ahead and introduce yourself and tell us where you're from. If you have not attended a live stream before, how it works is you can submit questions in the live chat field, or you could just simply send emails to me at clubcubase@steinberg.de. When asking questions, if you could specify which version of Cubase you're running, so if it's Cubase LE, AI, Elements, Artist Pro, or other Steinberg programs, which level, so if you're on version 10, 10.5, 11, or 12, also if you are, also which operating system that you're using. We should have all of the topics covered in today's live stream pinned to the top of the comments field with timestamps. But if you wanted to search for topics that have been covered on previous live streams, I think it's over 21,000 topics. You could go to cubaseindex.com, and Jan from Stockholm is always kind enough to create that website for us. We have two people that serve as moderators. So we have Jazz Dude and Agent K. We want to give them a special thanks. They're not Steinberg or Yamaha employees. They just do it to make it a better community. And also, if you want to, another wonderful resource of information is the Cubase Nation Discord, and I know Jazz Dude puts a lot of effort into that, so we'll give special thanks to him on that. We will be doing, in about 2 hours, our actual Zoom meetup. We usually do it on the last live stream of the month, but I was kind of in between Zoom licenses with corporate licensing and transitioning accounts, so we're going to do that today starting at 3 p.m., so in about 2 hours. So with that, we will go ahead and get started. Let me break out my chat. Okay, so I think some of the earlier questions, let me see if I could get those back. Didn't make it over when I popped out the chat. Sometimes if questions are asked beforehand, it doesn't carry over, but let's see. All right, so I think I have them on our screen. So we see, hello, Greg. This is Manuel from Angola. How can we transfer sheet music into Cubase? So generally, if you want to just enter in the notation, you could do that quite easily. So just going to like a MIDI track and being able to actually just look at it in the score editor. So if I wanted to come here, we could just enter the notation in there. Cubase doesn't really have a scanning provision where you scan sheet music and turn it into turn it into a score. Generally, those tend not to work very well, which is why a lot of companies have kind of abandoned that type of technology. I believe that there are some programs that will do kind of scanning, maybe I think even from a phone, and then will convert the music image into like a standard MIDI file or a music XML file, both of which can be imported directly into Cubase. So Cubase doesn't have like a scanning provision, but you could play it in or sequence it in and see it in the notation view. All right, so a question says, hi Greg, thank you so much for all your help. I would like to ask, please, I've created for my orchestral template more than 112 different colors for each instrument in the orchestra. I'm having a problem with saving them as a default. I'm in Cubase 11 Pro. Can you please show how to? I'm guessing I'm doing something wrong. I went to Project Color Setup and to Options and Store Color Set as default, but nothing is happening. I found that way that all of my palettes will be in the mix console. Preferences use track default colors. So if you're actually starting from a template, What I would do is just simply, once you have the colors set, instead of saving it as, if we go to our project color setup, that once we're here, we can go to options and then we could save color set as default. So that would probably do it for other programs, but if you're starting from a template, it's probably going to automatically, use the template colors. So make sure that, that once you have the colors, your 112 colors set up, that you come over here and choose to save the template with those colors. So I think if you do further projects, not based on a template, the default colors will work. But if you're kind of starting off with a template, I believe that, whatever color settings, because the colors and the color configurations and custom color preferences are going to be stored at the project level. So if you're starting off with a template that has its own color scheme, then that may not work for you. So try saving the color scheme as part of your template. And another question, is it possible to change the color of the cap fader in the mixer? I would like, for example, a gold color for the VCA channel or a particular group track. Thank you. So we could change for different fader types. So let's say if I come here and I'm going to add like a group track. Let's add an effects channel. Let's add a VCA. So as we do this, we can see that these different, we just send a track to a VCA so that we'll see. All right, so we can see that VCAs will be green, that we'll have effects channels. This blue will be for group channels. So we could do this by kind of mixer fader type. I think if we go to preferences, and let's come over here to our mix console fader colors. So if we wanted, instead of this green for the VCA fader, you could just double click and make it more gold. So you can't necessarily have different fader caps for different groups. So if you had like 3 group tracks, all the groups would be the same color, but you can modify them here. So again, go to preferences, to user interface, and then go to mix console fader colors. And then you could change what the fader color is for different track types. Okay, next question. Hello, is there an alternate way to effects automation for multiple tracks besides the group channel? Group channels increase the volume of the channels. I want to do automation on multiple tracks together, but not via a group channel. Okay, so let's say just a couple of different ways. So if we have, you don't necessarily have to do it with a group channel. So let's say if I go, we'll open up this and I will now add a number. I'll add like a reverb to different effects. So let's say, what I usually use is just an effects channel. So I'm going to select all my drum tracks here, and I'm going to right click and say add effects channel to selected tracks, and we'll put a reverb on. So now we'll have all my drums going through this going to this effects send. So if we solo the drums, so let's say dry here, and now when we kind of turn this on. So if I come over here, if I want to send the if I wanted to, increase or decrease the volume, I have my effects channel here. And that doesn't affect the gain of the tracks. It's just coming over and adjusting how much reverb is being returned into the signal. So you could automate those volume changes if I wanted to come here. So if I now play back, we'll see some of the automation start. So starting right here, we'll see the fader automation. Or if I wanted to come over here and adjust the level between the different tracks going to the reverb, again, I could automate all these particular tracks. I'm just going to put on quick link. Then I can say, okay, I want less reverb. So as we now come over here, we could have less reverb and automate all of those different tracks that easily. So you don't necessarily have to use an effects, a group channel for effects. So let me know if that works for you. Okay, so we see from Andy1324, hi, can you please give an example of audio advanced set definition from tempo? Okay, so let's say we have an audio track that has varying tempo. So I'm going to come over here. So we listen to this track and we don't really have, it's not correlated with the tempo. So I'm going to go to my project menu and go to tempo detection. So we now created a tempo map and we can see that we have varying tempo. So it's not a steady, perfectly steady tempo. But if I wanted this file to actually be a perfectly steady tempo instead of these kind of fluctuations, I could select the event and we can see all the different tempo changes have been detected by, for every single beat. And I'm going to go to audio, to advanced, and we'll say set definition from tempo. So we could store this within the project only, or we could actually embed the metadata, all the tempo changes of every single beat into the audio file itself. So I'll just say yes. So now Cubase knows exactly when this file is speeding up and slowing down. So as I just change my tempo, let's say I want to take it from the fluctuating tempo here. I'm going to take this tempo off. And now I'm just going to type in, let's say 144, which is kind of like maybe an average tempo. And now it's going to play back at a perfectly steady tempo. Or if I wanted to take this and take the tempo and just speed it up over time, or take this tempo and I want to slow this whole tempo down and I want it to kind of compress or expand the tempo. So we hear tempo speeding up. It goes back to the original tempo, then it gets here. We could kind of compress the fluctuations. And say, now I just want to move this up. But you won't be able to have the audio file react accurately that has multiple tempos within it to other tempo changes, whether you want it to be steady or just kind of modify it, until you go to audio and again to advanced and then set definition from tempo. So that's the intention of that particular feature. All right. So we see it's wonderful to see Kerwin Young on from Atlanta. And Kerwin asks, regarding Retrospective Record, I recently upgraded to Windows 11. I noticed that Retrospective Record does not respond to incoming MIDI all the time. What could cause the inconsistency? So let's say if I'm here, like I don't have a MIDI track now, and I'm just going to play some MIDI notes on my controller keyboard. Let me add an instrument track, and I'll just come here. We'll add, and let's say I click on Retrospective Record. Okay, so even here, we look at it. So if there's no MIDI track, or let's say if I don't have a MIDI track selected, so let's say I have an audio track selected, and let's say if I come here and hit retrospective record, so let's say, I'll just do this one more time. So let me move it over here. So if I don't have a MIDI track selected, and I'll just hit keys on my controller keyboard. All right, and let's say, okay, now I want it on this instrument track, so I'll hit retrospective record. So it looks like that is appearing. So I haven't really come across, I mean, I could see if there wasn't like a MIDI track in the project that it might, not do anything. But it seems like if you hit, but if you have like the audio track selected, and I come and hit the retrospective record, that, if it's not actually, if there's not a track selected, that you may not get data. But, so check that out. And let me know if you can, if you actually have a track selected, Kerwin. All right, wonderful to see John Costigan on the live stream. We see Benny from Sweden. All right, and we see Luca checking in from Munich. And I did post the Zoom meetup contact. All right, we have Robbie Bowling from Dallas. We have Filter Freak. So we have Mark Madsen just saying a remarkable warm fall day in Chicago today. Yeah, in DC we've had kind of unseasonably warm weather, so it's been nice. All right. All right, so we see from Dallas LaRue says sometimes when using the MIDI editor, it plays notes that aren't showing. I have tried everything, I can't figure it out. So if you're in a situation like that, one of the things that I would check is, make sure that like while you're in the MIDI editor that you solo, so it's not maybe coming from a different area. And sometimes, it may, so I'm not sure if, let's say if I have notes here, and, if we look at, even though it's on the same track, so let's say if I change the start position of this note, that I could be here and I don't see a note, and it could also be if these events, let's say these events are overlapped. So if I wanted to just look, so right now I see two events that are overlapped. And if I double click, it's going to just select the top event as opposed to notes that may be on the event underneath. And you could click in the bottom center to select between the two. So make sure that you don't have like maybe two different parts that are kind of stacked on top of each other. And if you open this up in lanes, you may notice, but see if you go to the center bottom of the event and see if you see notes, and maybe there's another MIDI part that's underneath the one that that you clicked on to edit. All right, so we see Mark is just saying I use a Mac Pro and Steinberg Cubase SE. I think because the computer I have in Steinberg UR44 interface, so it's probably maybe a Cubase AI version is what comes with the UR44. All right, so we see, hi Greg, is there a shortcut key to create a MIDI part in the project page without using the pencil tool in Cubase 12? So if you have like left and right locators, so let's say if I come here, I'll just delete. Let's say I have my left and right locators selected. You could just double click between with the object selection tool without having to draw an event. So, again, just if you don't want to switch to, the pencil tool to create kind of a container event, just simply double click between the left and right locators on that track, and that will create an event for you. All right, so we see Damir G checking in from Houston. Thanks for joining us. And we have Robotic on as well. Thanks for being on. And we see Peter from Montreal. And we have Uno Momento from a very dark Finland. All right. So we just see, how do you save a sampler instrument together with its samples? So let's say if I have a particular... I would just come over here. Let's go to this project. All right, so say I have a drum loop and I wanted to create a sampler track preset from it. Right, all you have to do is, as we come over here, I'm just going to drag. I'll create my sampler track here. And I'll just drag the audio to that, and it's going to automatically create a sampler track for me. And then all you have to do is just simply come over here and you can see presets. So we can say, okay, let's save a track preset. So we'll call this November 4th. All right, and then we hit OK. So now when we want to call up that sampler track again, we could go to user presets, and then we will see track presets, and then sampler, and then we could just simply drag and drop and open up that sampler track again. So it just kind of shows up as a track preset. So think of it as a sampler track preset. Then you could use that in any other project. So let me know if that's helpful. All right, so we see from Jay Faceless, can I create my own loops? I'm new to Cubase, so yeah, certainly. So you could do all the programming, make your own beats, make your own loops, and very easily just be able to access and, see all of your various loops. So if you wanted to have access to them, you could say, okay, I just want to go to loops and samples, and, you could, or if you wanted to go to a particular folder where all of your loops are. So, and once you've kind of created different elements of a loop, you can just come over to export audio mixdown, and then that would be able to create your new loop. All right, so we see BFL Entertainment says, greeting Greg Victor from Poconos, Pennsylvania. So I have cousins live in Poconos, and most of my family is from Scranton. My mom's side of the family is from Scranton, Wilkes-Barre. My cousin lives on Lake Wallenpaupack. So his question is, I've noticed when opening Cubase 12, I see a notation font missing. How can I fix? If you could let me know which notation font it is and, like what message. So, sometimes reinstalling should do that, so you have a number of different, several different notation fonts. So if I wanted to look at my score here, let's go to page mode. And when we come over here, we could just say, your font settings. So there's kind of classical jazz, bravura, and Petaluma, and these two are from Dorico. So let me know if you have a particular font that's saying that it's missing. And if you want to email me at clubcubase@steinberg.de, I'd be happy to kind of do some more research. But usually it's kind of automatically installed with the program. All right. All right, so we see how to change colors on selected notes. So I assume this is maybe in a key editor. So let's say if we're here, and as notes are selected. So I think what some people do is it could really depend on kind of the default colors. So I know what I've seen some people do is just to use is to make all of their notes kind of, is changing some of the different so like as you select, but generally it's going to be, and sometimes what people will do if you don't want to see necessarily kind of the dark area here is I know like I think Hans has his where all of his notes are white. But also for selected notes, so it's going to be dark, but it could be more obvious if you go to preferences and go to color schemes and go to editor area background. So some people will do this and kind of make a lighter area, a lighter background color. So when you select notes, you don't have to go that extreme, obviously, but kind of lightening up the background may also help with that. All right, and we have Stefan from Sweden. All right, so we just see, did you book yours from Daniela? Did you book your Zoom account? When I did review your last week's video, you told me to plan to book a Zoom account. So the Zoom link was posted in the chat a little earlier. I'll try to post it about every half hour as well, just so people can know. But we'll be starting in about an hour and a half. So I'll go ahead and just as a good reminder, Daniela, thank you. I'll paste the Zoom link again. All right, so a question, is this Cubase 12? So yes, this is Cubase 12.05. This is a maintenance release. The latest version just released this week. Okay, so we have a question. Hi, please, can you show me how to automate a fader so that when I release the fader, it jumps back to its previous position where I started the automation from? Okay, so let's come over here. I'll just do new project, or I think we could maybe do it. Okay, so let's say we have all right, so I'm going to come over here to my fader. So let's say I want to do automation. All right, so let me just. So right now we have kind of a static automation point, but we don't necessarily have an automation value that's been written. So let's say if I automate here, so I just play, and let's say if I automate, let me just take it out of loop. Sorry about that. All right, so now if I go to automate, I can just come here. So, and if I wanted to do like a touch up, now why it doesn't kind of jump back to the previous state is there's no state for it to go back to until you actually write an automation point. So let's say if I'm here and now I'm in touch automation. So let's say we're here and now I move it and let go. it'll go back because it has a known state, just like an analog console that, it's going to stay in that position until it goes to, until if there's nothing for it to return to, Cubase can't assume what value you want it to be at. So what some people do is you could go into the automation panel and you can say right to start and to end. And let's say, okay, I want kind of a automation points there. So now that I've done that, and you can do that for all tracks at once when I automate. So at this point, again, it just needs a value at the end for it to return to. So if you have an automation point directly there, now it's going to automatically go back because it's returning to a known automation point. You see, Gareth just asked that the clocks haven't changed in the USA yet. So no, it's going to be changing this Sunday morning. So we should be in sync again, USA and Europe coming up. All right, so we see Michael Teams has already started granting ice cream to people. It's wonderful to see Gareth on and Gerald Ely from Martinez, California. All right, Gerald Ely asks, looking for input, what's the best way to collaborate with someone who uses Logic Pro X? So if you're dealing with, audio, probably the easiest way to do it is, what people have done for ages using different programs is just come over and have, if it's going to be MIDI information, is just have a standard MIDI file. So that will carry over all the MIDI information, the MIDI CCs, all that different data. If you don't want to go too crazy, if it's going to be kind of a, project where you're just kind of dealing with a lot of audio files, it's easy for both sides to make stems or kind of equal length audio files. And all you have to do at this point, let's say we have a number of audio files in our project, and let me just revert. So all the programs now will do timestamps on the audio files. So if I take all these audio files and import them, all you really have to do is say, okay, I want to select all, let's say, okay, I have files here. I just imported them all, select the files, and then we could go to edit and go to move, and we could say move to origin, and that would place all the audio files at their timestamp positions. So dealing with plugins, it's not going to be as straightforward because Logic is one of the few programs that doesn't run VST plugins. So, but, if you just want to get kind of the audio and MIDI information over, it's pretty easy with timestamped audio files or just using standard MIDI files. All right, so we see Soren from Sweden. Great to see you on. All right, and we have Barry from Southwest France. Thanks for being on the live stream today. Barry Lerve. Or Lerve. All right, so we see Benny just saying, saw that some are having problems opening projects from Cubase 11 to Cubase 12.05. Anyone else having that problem? So I haven't had any problems with that. I think I saw one person on a Facebook group that had it, and then they kind of isolated it to a particular guitar amp plugin. So it could be something like that. All right, Michael Teams wants people to smash the like button. We see Derek Marshall has smashed it. So appreciate that. All right, so we see, hello team, I'm looking for a way to identify MIDI events that are shared when clicking on an event. Only a little equal on top, but it doesn't know which is shared. All right, so let's say if we have MIDI event here, and I'm going to hit Control K, and I wanted to let me just think, or I'll just come here, hold down Alt. I think it's Shift. All right, so, when we look at the events here for shared, so, the way to, indicate which, are shared is by the little corner indication there. And always if you, want to see what is the master one, so let's say if I make an edit in here, if that's going to. So, what if you make an edit in the shared copy or not, so at that point you can see that, but that's the only indication that I know of that indicates that it's a shared copy. All right. Wonderful to see Dave Glick on the live stream. Thanks for joining us. All right. So we see from Dallas LaRue says, I have a song that is 66 tempo. All the drum fills and groove agents seem to be too slow or lazy. Could I double the tempo of just that measure to make it work? Okay, so let's come over here. I'll just add. I'll just jump to another project here. Okay, so I will. All right, so let's say I'll drag a couple patterns over here. All right, so let's say if I want to just click on this particular pattern, so let's say this is where my fill is, and I'm going to go to Edit. So we listen to it now. All right, so I think some of these, like normal patterns, that, fills, normal patterns we could set to half time. But let's say if I have my fill here, and this is my fill. So if I wanted that to be half time, what I could do is just do a sizing applies time stretch. And then let's just come here to this particular event. And then I could just, and let's go ahead and copy that. So now our fill will be twice as fast. So with the MIDI event, switch to the sizing mode to sizing applies time stretch, and then you could just simply drag it and make it a little faster. And you could obviously make your own fills as well, but usually like the patterns, as we're playing patterns in Groove Agent, and some of the fills don't have this flexibility, but here we can say, okay, I want to do like a halftime feel, and each of these patterns, like the yellow patterns, will have half, and so especially you get more kind of complex. So say now I want, but the fills are kind of more fixed with that. But again, just simply try taking just a part on the main project window, and then if you wanted to just switch this sizing mode, and you could just hit the 1 key a couple times to cycle through. So when you see the clock, you can say, okay, now I want that to fit into 2 bars of space. And as we do this, so give that a try, Dallas. All right, wonderful to see Brian Sawyer from Beulahville, North Carolina. Thanks for joining us. All right, so we see a question, is it possible to run Cubase entirely on an external hard drive instead of the PC itself? Well, you know, if it's running from the hard drive, it's still running on the PC, but I think that there's going to be driver files and font files and stuff like that that need to be accessed, you know, on parts of the operating system. So I haven't tried it in a long bit, but I would think that, you know, some components are going to need to be on the system drive just so that your audio interface knows how to work, fonts and stuff like that, drivers for your MIDI interface, your audio interface, all that type of stuff. Okay, so we see question, 32-bit versus 64-bit for tracking. Thanks. So if you have a 32-bit audio interface and you're recording like a 32-bit integer audio interface like the Steinberg AXR or the Steinberg URC interfaces, and you are, you know, you can record at 32-bit integer. So that will sound slightly better than 24-bit converters. There's more information captured. If you wanted to record with plugins on the way in with a 32-bit integer, that's when you could record in 64-bit floating point. So, you know, a lot of people may record in 32-bit floating point, but depending on your audio interface, if you're not really, you know, if you don't have a 32-bit integer converter in your program, then it may not make a lot of sense to record at 64-bit. You're just going to have unnecessary information that doesn't do you any good. All right, so we see from a question from Patrick. Hi, Greg. Question: search by name in MediaBay because while I search by name, I get unrelated samples. If I type G minor, all G minor samples should appear. Can you show us do you have any specific settings in MediaBay? All right, so let's take a look. If I hit the right keyboard shortcut, so let's say, okay, I want to come over to my computer and we'll look for all media. Let's say I just want to look for audio files. Okay, so let's see if I have. All right, so if I come here, we could see, and it could be, you know, realize that like when you go, so let's say I just did G minor here. That I think if we look at like these particular keys, like may have metadata. So realize that when we do this, that, you let's say if we scoot over, and at this point we could see, other criteria. So let's say if I wanted to come over here, so we could say matches or in range, but let's look at our priorities. So at this point, let me just scoot this over just. So, these are some of the priorities that you could have. So, you could, instead of just showing these particular values, we could look at, particular attributes as well. So if the song was in G minor, or, has, or let's say if I come here, let's do our logical editing for this, and we can say matches or is in range or equals G minor. So at this point you could have different kind of Boolean conditions. So you can say, okay, anything that has minor, or you could have it not look at particular keys as well. So, you could have different criteria that you're searching for. So it could be that the metadata of the key may be set to G minor, or it's in a project with a chord track that has G minor in it. So, check for, what actual categories that you have as well. So when you come over here, you could just, if you wanted to search for different types of filters, you could go to the setup window there. All right, wonderful to see Nick. And just want to let everyone know that I finally got all the email addresses from everyone from the raffle winners from the 250th. So I got that sent over to Steinberg. So hopefully we should have those prizes early next week for people. So we're just waiting on some people to get their content, their information to me. So we got that all taken care of. So just a quick heads up on that. All right, wonderful to see Jay from Connecticut on. It's Secret Studios. Right, sorry, my chat field just jumped on me. All right, so we see a question from Dalpsky. Hi, Greg. I wanted to time stretch a MIDI and audio file at the same time. How? Okay, so let's say I have a loop. So let's say, okay, I'm just going to come over here. Let's throw a drum loop in. Okay, so now I'm going to select these. I'm in my sizing applies time stretch mode. So let's see if we could do these both at the same time. So yeah, just do it. Sizing applies time stretch, and then you could stretch MIDI and audio at the same time. So just go switch your object selection tool to sizing applies time stretch, and then you select both your audio and MIDI events, and then you could time stretch both simultaneously. All right, Jay's just asking if anyone's using a Softtube Console 1 fader. All right, so Max from Ethiopia asks, I can't hear voices when moving vocal notes in Very Audio, even when I turned on the mic signal. All right, so let's say we have just a quick audio. All right, so I'll drag this over and let's do quick vary audio. So it's probably just one. So let's say now make sure that you have this little, so I don't have my acoustic feedback icon. It looks like a speaker. So as I move events, I don't hear it. I'm going to turn this on and now. So make sure that this icon that looks like a little speaker, the acoustic feedback option, is enabled in Vary Audio. All right, so you see Gareth just says, I had a chance to try out WaveLab, really impressed. So it's a great program. I've been using it since, I guess it came out in 94, 95. So. All right, so we have a question from, says, I have a project where most of it are audio files. I've added a sound effects contact library to an instrument track, and I have the monitor button turned on when the timeline is playing, contact playing randomly. So make sure that, you don't have, just out of curiosity, sometimes people will, use a control surface, and the control surface is transmitting MIDI data or other parts. So one of the things you could do is if we go to your studio menu to studio setup and go to your MIDI port setup, if you have different audio interface, different MIDI interfaces that are primarily used only for in all MIDI input, for control, try to turn off in all MIDI inputs, but realize that it's probably getting MIDI from somewhere. So, even if you come over and, take this particular, track where you have the contact sound effects, try just setting it to not connected, because there's a good chance that it's getting MIDI from some track, and that MIDI maybe from the controller or is being sent from somewhere else is triggering those particular sounds. So one quick way is just to take that contact track and set it to not connected and see if that solves it, and realize that something else is probably sending MIDI data that's being received into all MIDI inputs. Let's see, Garrett says he learned WaveLab real fast thanks to my perfect demo from 2011. Yeah, those demos have a long legs. So. All right, so we see a question. Is there a way to make a tape stop effect from a selected range of audio clip? So, one of the tools that you could use is, so say if I have just like this little vocal, I feel the way, and I want to do a tape stop effect, if you go to inserts, you could just come over here, and it's found under others, a plugin called Loop Mash FX. So, and then let's say if I just want to come here, you will have like different performance, and you could actually play this from MIDI keyboard or just automate it. So it's like, I feel the way. All right, let me just put this in a quick loop. I feel the way. Oh, okay, I'm gonna turn it on. Have my constrained delay compensation. All right, so I feel the way. So you could just feel the way. So let's set this to I feel the way. So you could just come right over there. So let's say, just while you're playing, feel the way. If you wanted to last longer, you could change kind of the rhythmic. I feel the way. I feel the way. or if you want it to be faster.
I feel the way.
So if you just wanted to automate, you could do stuff like that very easily. So check out the Loop Mash FX, and you could just automate that, or you could actually play it if you want to do different chops and stuff like that. It's a very great plugin for that. All right, so we see Camille checking in from Czech Republic. Thanks for joining us. All right, so we have David Barbush checking in from Tampa, Florida. He's like number 40. Thanks for being on. All right, so a question. Hey, do you know how I can play in halftime without a halftime plugin? So you don't need a plugin necessarily for that, but let's say if we have audio that is set up for that's in, so we know what the tempo is, and we know kind of what the musical, what the tempo of it is, and we have all the events into musical mode. So here I've recorded this into Cubase. I'm going to select all the events and make sure that it's in musical mode. So as we do this, we could just say, you see my tempo is at 100 beats a minute. So once we're in musical mode, I could just say, okay, go to 50. And I don't have the bass in musical mode. So let me just switch that one here. All right. So whatever tempo. So I just say, okay, let's make it 50 beats a minute. Or if I want to play 150 instead of 100. So we could, if we go to the pool window, just come over to the pool window here. We can make sure that the origin tempo is correct. So, and if not, we could come over here, select all of the events. We could then place it into musical mode and then just kind of come over here and adjust the tempo. And if you wanted to, if we have like a tempo track enabled, so let's say we're here, we could also just create kind of like a Project Logical Editor preset. So if we go to Project Logical Editor, we could say we want to take media type is equal to tempo, and then we want to trim, we'll say divide by 2. So now when I come here, we could just save that, or we could say multiply by 2. And then you could just kind of change the tempo like that. If you are going to be doing that a lot, you could just, and then configure that, save it as a preset, and configure that preset to be triggered from a control surface. All right, so we see Haley Jade just saying hello. Thanks for joining us today. All right, so we have a question. Hello, Greg. Is there a command for that if there are two audio events, like a kick and snare, that fall on the same bit? We want to chop them so that the snare falls after the kick. All right. All right. So say if we have this where we have like events happening at the same time. All right. So let's say if I have come in and maybe I split the events here. So, or I could just take this, if let's say, all right, so let's come here to our folder track. Just reread it. So, once we just take snap off here. So let's say if I wanted to, if these are coming at the same time, I could just have these selected like in the folder. So now if I wanted to select, my snare tracks, at this point, we could come over here to sizing moves content. So if I wanted to just kind of move the snare beginning to somewhere else, but I'll do it without the folder selected or group editing turned on. So, but there's no way, there's no kind of, you might have to do it manually as opposed to saying, move snare tracks over one beat. So I think, but if you have, so I'm not sure if it's like you just wanted to offset all of the snares, you could do it in MIDI very easily, but there could be a lot of bleed through and stuff in audio as well. All right, so you see from Ross Humphreys, Greg, thanks for all you do. Please do an in-depth tutorial on programming Cubase 12 for use with MIDI controllers. So I did one on Cubase 12. There's some new functionality, a lot of new functionality for the MIDI remote that was just released this week. So I was kind of prepping for some tutorials on that this morning before the live streams. All right, so we have a question from Benny. Can I change the location from one disk to another in the library manager and it will still work in Cubase 12 so that Cubase finds everything? So yeah, when you open up the library manager, that's really kind of the intention, is that if you needed to move all of your content or instrument content to a different location, so I'll just show it here for people who haven't played around with it. So when you go to our Steinberg library manager, all you'd have to do is if you go to settings, you could click on the settings wheel. At this point, you could choose a different location, or you could move each of these content to different locations. And once you do the locations, then Cubase will automatically know exactly where the content is once you've done it through the library manager. All right, so we have the artist known as Love checking in from New York. Thanks for joining us. And he hit the like buttons. That's great. All right, so from Haley Jade, says, I got a song with strings only and the tempo is dynamic and it's very hard for a newbie like me to know what the right tempo and how to make it consistent tempo. Can you give advice and show how to? Okay. So we'll just jump back to one of our other projects here. And sometimes you may notice that tempo fluctuations are a good natural musical thing. Sometimes it's not. So, if all of your recordings are kind of in time with themselves, you can, just select an audio file or select a MIDI track, go to project, and we can say, let's go to tempo detection. So we'll analyze it. All right, so now Cubase has created tempos, and you may have, like, if it's in 3/4 or 6/8, or you can say, okay, like, you may have to do like an offbeat correction. So once I've done that, we can see that we're going to have our fluctuating tempos here. Now, we could select all of the events, go to audio, go to advanced, and set definition from tempo. We could store this metadata. What this is going to do is take the tempo changes and where they are in the audio file, and it's going to embed those tempo changes into the audio file. So now, let's say our tempo is too erratic here. I could select the tempo information and say, okay, I wanted this to do a retard. And now as we listen to it, or I wanted to bring this back up. I wanted to speed up now instead. And then go back to the original tempo. Or it's just fluctuating too much. I could just kind of tighten up the tempo fluctuations. Or if I want it to be perfectly steady, instead of following the tempo changes that I've edited, I can now just come in here and say, I want this to be 144. And now we see the straight line is the tempo. This was the curved lines is the original tempo. So once again, just do kind of a tempo detection, select the event or events, go to audio and to advanced and set definition from tempo, and then you can make your tempo changes. All right, get my laptop back on. All right, I'm going to go ahead and post the Zoom link. We're going to be starting in about 53 minutes, and if you haven't been on a Zoom meetup, it's always really fun getting to meet other users. Wonderful discussion, so looking forward to meeting some new people. All right, so we just see how to finally make a bus from a track folder. So realize that track folders can contain multiple types of tracks that don't have an audio output. It could contain video tracks, chord tracks. So, but if you wanted to easily, take all of the tracks, so say if we're here in this project, and let's say I wanted to take all of my tracks and add them to a folder and to a bus, we could do that. So let's come over here and just revert. So, and there's a macro that does this automatically. But again, realize that folder tracks, can contain a lot more than just audio parts, So I want to take this and let's go to macros. My macro list is large because I make tons of macros, but we can say, I think it's selected tracks to new folder and add group channel. So once I do this, I'll just say, okay, drums. And now it's automatically created our folder track and it's created our drum bus within that folder track. So, but again, realize that folder tracks can contain lots of data that don't, so does it make sense to bus the video to, to a group track because it's in a folder, or a tempo track. So stuff like that, or ruler tracks. All right, sorry, my chat field jumped on me. Hey Greg, can you do a tutorial on how to make loops from scratch? Thanks. All right, so say I just want to make like, a quick drum loop, something like that. I'll come over here. All right, let me just open that up, so closing it accidentally. All right, so I'm just going to come over here. Let's do, I have just a drum kit loaded up here. All right, so if I wanted to come here, I'm just going to do this in Groove Agent. I'm going to have it automatically come up with, we could create the drum map from the instruments. And now when I double click, just switch my, all right. And I will just come over here and let's say, okay, I can see all of my different kick sounds. All right, and let me just make sure I don't have just on the instrument itself, have that track soloed. Yeah, okay. All right, so I'll just come over here. Let me just get again on the right note. So let's say we have drum sounds here. Okay, so I'll just make this a bigger window. All right, so let's say, and I'll just put my click on. All right, so say, and then if I just want to adjust my velocities here. So let's say I just want to come here. So now when I paint in, I can do different rhythmic values. So let's say now I do 16th note triplets instead. So you could do like just some stuff like that, and that's how you could, make different loops very easily in Cubase using the drum editor. So. All right. So we see from Pedro asks, "Hi Greg. Recently, users are reporting bad behavior in the browser panel, not showing the instruments correctly. Kits are okay, but not instruments. Can you check it as an official? Can you check it in yours?" 12.05 with Groove Agent. All right. So let's go ahead and take a look. So I will just come over here. All right, so say I wanted to replace this kick. So let's come over here to the browser panel. Let's go to instruments. All right, so let's come over to, let's say kicks. So I'll just say that, and all right, make sure. So it looks like everything is kind of working as expected there. Let me know if that's what you needed, Pedro. But it looks like that's working fine. So Rui just asks, "Hi Greg, do you find it useful to have ASIO Guard active, or do you think having it off will help on dropouts?" So generally, having it active will improve your performance, but realize that when we, some plugins don't like to have ASIO Guard active. So I think some people that are running stuff on VE Pro tend to find that the ASIO Guard doesn't work as well with VE Pro or something. I'm not a VE Pro user, but as a, just a quick, very easy way of being able to, just easy answer is yes. It will definitely, allow you to run more tracks, with ASIO Guard active. So. All right, so we see what are the pros and cons for time stretch versus free warp. So we could think of, in essence, they're going to be doing kind of the same things, but realize that if we do a time stretch, that it's going to be for the entire file. So when I come here and I do a sizing applies time stretch, if I do this, that the whole file is time stretch. But if I do a free warp, I could keep the length the same and say, it's just this part that needs to be a little earlier or later without affecting all the other parts. So if you had something that you needed to do a quick rhythmic correction in, free warp is probably a better tool. If you needed this to play back the entire file to play back faster or slower, then time stretch would be fine. But so think of free warp is moving an individual note within, and then so it's like kind of like almost like a micro time stretch. So you can say, I'm just going to time stretch that out without affecting the other notes. So just taking kind of one element within an audio file and stretching it, then that's when free warp makes a lot of sense. All right, wonderful to see Vinny Sabatino on. All right, so Jason Williams says, is there a way to change the fonts or size the bottom mixer track name or the insert plugin names? So let's say if we're here, so let's go to our mix console. So I think that this will be kind of a fixed size depending, so how you have named it. So let's say, if you zoom in, you could see that it gets bigger. And let's say, if we zoom this, so we zoom vertically, horizontally, that can make it kind of a bigger size. And let's go to the inserts. But it's going to depend upon the screen resolution that you're running. So like if we have a number of inserts there, you can see more characters depending on your zoom factor as well. But there isn't a way to say, make it like what I would need the Mr. Magoo font, but I find it's pretty easy to read. Okay, so Vinny Sabatino says hit the like, so it's great. Wonderful to have Matt Elston on. He's playing catch up tonight because of time changes. All right, so we see from Patrick A. Greg, I bought some 808 samples. Can I draw a pitch bend on that, or UI only works with sampler? So, you could draw, pitch bend will respond to, is a MIDI command. So it's going to be neat. Pitch bend could just be sent directly to a particular, MIDI instrument, and that MIDI instrument will respond to it. But let's say if I come to here, that's just, but if you need it to do it otherwise, let's say, I just want to look for. All right, so let's say I wanted to drop this sample in. Okay, but if you wanted to do kind of, sorry, just wrong tool. Let's say if I wanted to do this and, change the pitch. So let's say as we're here. So if I want to take something like that, I could just come over to my audio and we'll go to our, processes, and we could just go to pitch shift. And then if I wanted to, we could set kind of our range of semitones. So if I now just want to come here, we could, just change the pitch shift. So if I wanted to go up, let's say halfway through, or go halfway down, we could just simply kind of come here and draw in. So you could do pitch shifting, stuff like that, but it's, you would do it kind of in the process here. But if you're doing it in the sampler track, at this point you could just drag and drop it into the sampler track. And now that you have this particular file, you could just, control the pitch bend amount right there. So, but if you needed to kind of just do it quickly on an audio file, just go to audio to processes and go to pitch shift. And then you could just delete all of the processing and go back at any time if you need to. All right, so Vinny Sabatino's just asking if people want to help him out just on a project that he's mixing. So anyone who wants to help him out, just let Vinny know. All right, so we have a question. When working in a MIDI editor and a loop is selected, is there a way when you come out of the editor to loop straight away? What we have, don't another one when playing around with the hi-hats and sampler. Okay, so is there a way to come out and loop straight away what we have? So let's say, all right, so let's say I'm playing this. Okay, so let's say if we have this kind of loop, all right, so let's say if we had this loop, so as we make a loop here, it's automatically carried over into the main project window. So if I want to and so let's see if I wanted to just kind of take, all right, so let's say, let's see if we could split. All right, so a lot of times what I would do in a case like that, if I wanted to just loop, we could just kind of do a range selection and then come over here and crop, and that would get rid of the the excess areas, and then you could just copy like that. So let me know if that's kind of what you want to accomplish. Okay. Okay, so question, when playing around with the hi-hats in the sampler track, could you show how to modulate the decays or sustain so that the hi-hat changes a bit? Okay, so let me just find a hat. Okay, so let me just now come over here. I'll just kind of paint some notes in. All right, so let's say we have something like that. So let's go back to sampler control. All right, so let's say so if we wanted to even kind of set up different filters for this, we could, so it's not so much like, let's come over here and let's click on kind of the playback. So if we wanted to so say we have LFO 1. So if you wanted to come over here and be able to, so let's say this is just with pitch, but we could make it more, so you could do some stuff like this. Okay, let's say volume would be modulation 1. So when let's say we wanted to adjust our rate and shape. So say we're on, let's say we get an alpha 1. So you could do some stuff like that, but Groove Agent also has some really good tools for hi-hats for stuff like that as well. Okay, so we see from Mark Madsen, does time stretch affect video tracks in Nuendo 12 Pro? So, ideally most people don't, do their primary video editing inside of Nuendo. So, the time stretch is going to be, for audio and MIDI, because most of the time people just want to be able to do, they never want the video to change because they're always composing to that. All right, we see Jazz Dude's made it despite the time difference, so I was beginning to worry that you're okay, but we're so glad that you made it. All right, so we see, hi, missed a great deal of 40% discount plus software. Will there be something similar on Black Friday or Christmas? There will be Black Friday promotions, I'm sure. I'm not sure if it will be specifically for Cubase in that, but there's always future promotions that will be going on as well. So, but currently there's a 50% discount for Nuendo that's going to be ending soon, so you can check that out. All right, so we see from Bjorn Wegner, hi Greg, I have a project with 200 voice files on different lengths. Is there a way to take a batch process to render all the files within effects as single files? Okay, so let's come over here. I'll just do new project. Okay, so I'm just going to come here. Okay, so let's say I'm just going to import these to a track. All right, we're going to put it all in one track. Okay, so we have a number of files here. So I'm going to select all of them, and then just for editing, I'm going to say let's put a spacer between these. So we'll go to functions, and we'll give it like a 2-second space between events. So we'll just say 2 seconds. Okay, so now I have like all of these particular files. So really all you have to do, if you wanted to have these, you could render in place with, different effects. So if you select the files and you have, let's say, an insert effect. So let's say, okay, on this we'll put a reverb on it. Okay, so now we play. Right, and I'll just adjust my. So let's say I want to put all these effects on. Really, some ways of doing this is you could select all the events. I'll just do a couple here for demonstration purposes. And then if you go to edit to render in place, you could say, let's go to render settings. I want to include the channel settings, and let's do these as separate events. So now I'll just take those selected events, and we'll render it with the effects on it. And if I don't have it muted here, that would help. All right. So I'll do this again. Sorry about that. And now we will have kind of the original file at top. So let's come here. And now with the effects rendered on it. So we could do, multiple files all at once. Another technique for this is to Say we want to select these events. If you wanted to put it into a particular folder, we could say export selected events, and we'll get kind of the same processing options. And then we could, just choose a file path, and all selected events could be exported as individual files. And this is really handy if you're working in kind of like a non-linear type of scenario. We're going to have different, where it could be different actual, where it doesn't matter where they fall in relation to time, but you just have to process like 200 audio files together. So. All right. So we see Kevin just says, I've been using Cubase since 1998. What are the big differences between Pro Tools Complete and Cubase 12? So with Cubase 12, you could own the software instead of just doing a lease on the software and paying for a subscription. I don't know Pro Tools well, but I would say that if you're familiar with Cubase and you have lots of projects in Cubase, that Cubase will play it back. And we do these nice live streams, so where other companies don't. All right, my timeline jumped on me. All right, so we see Rumley just asking, hi, is there a volume function in Cubase that can adjust a fader to match the volume before adding a VST effect so I don't have to manually adjust the fader again? So, it's really, a lot of times, it's should be kind of, up to the plugin, that if the plugin is is creating a gain stage change, that a lot of times when you go to like different plugins, that the plugin that's kind of doing the offense often kind of takes care of it. So when we come over here, like in Dynamics plugins, that you have kind of automatic makeup gain. So that's probably a better way of doing it. And realize that if you're putting the plugin in, it's often to get a gain change. That's why people put dynamics processing or EQs, so EQs are just doing gain changes on specific frequencies. So a lot of times what you have is kind of an auto gain setting within a plugin that does that. And that's probably a better place than Cubase having to figure out what, the different parameters of how each plugin is dealing with the, the gain of the audio signal. All right, Greg Malik asks, aloha, following up regarding matching vibrato between two singers on different tracks, could a section of audio be turned into MIDI to drive a second singer's vibrato? So we could turn it into MIDI, but we can't necessarily use the MIDI as a reference for the vibrato on another audio track. All right, so we have a question from Asher Albert. Hello, Greg. I have a question about MIDI CC parameters. I use a Yamaha Genos with Cubase, and all the MIDI CC works fine. With Genos only EQ parameter, my question is, which one is MIDI EQ CC in Cubase? So, generally MIDI doesn't have an EQ. But, any parameter that you want to assign, to particular functions, we could come over here to your MIDI remote. So if you have a MIDI remote script, you can say, okay, this knob here, and I think that there's a EQ of selected track, and each of these functions can automatically, say, okay, I want it to go to, the selected track, and let's go to EQ, and I could turn on the band, the frequency, the gain. So you could create kind of a remote control and have those remote controls, then control the Cubase channel EQ. So, but you need to, kind of create the control surface here, or set up you could also do it from studio setup. And if you go to generic remote, you can assign various MIDI CCs to control functions in Cubase there. All right, I know we had some questions that were sent in, and since we're ending in just a little bit, we'll make sure we try to get to these questions. Okay, so we have a question. Hi, I'm struggling to get everything to sound great in the mix before starting mixing/balance. So I wonder if you could show how to make a great sounding and balanced template so I can start up all new projects with the same template. Show me how you make the template from A to Z. I shall mention I work in country music genre. Okay, so, sometimes, realize that a lot of times, templates are often used for composers to have access to all the sounds. I know a lot of mix engineers that don't want to necessarily have a particular template because they feel that they'll use the same things on every project. What I would recommend doing, so let's say if you have a project that is kind of set up the way that you want. So let's say I want to take, or I'll do maybe even, let's say I'll just do something, let's say since you said kind of country, let me just pop over to this. All right. All right. So let's say, I really like a particular project that I'm working on. So let's say you kind of mixed one, and everyone's going to have different plugins, different philosophies on this. But what I would do is maybe take a particular project here and say, okay, I like how this vocal is EQ'd. I like the processing. I like, let's say, okay, I like this guitar. I like kind of the bass. So I would just take this, get rid of all of the content, and at this point, save as template. So this way, that it's a project that you kind of like the sound of, and just simply save as template, and then you can say, okay, this is like country ballad. So then, you'll that, okay, I like these effects. I like this combination of effects. I like these instruments. I could add different elements here. But, just take a particular project, get rid of all of the audio files in it, and then save as a template. And then that will help get you started pretty quickly along those lines. But, every project could be unique and have different instruments. And I see some people like making everything kind of work to fit their template, and it doesn't necessarily always work for the songs, but it's easier for the engineer. And I would tend to shy away from that if possible. All right, and we had this question come up a couple times. How do you create multiple sampler tracks at once? All right, so I kind of found a way of doing this. Let's say we had a number of, we wanted to take, and people had asked, can I just make multiple sample tracks from here? So what we can do is if I take these to a particular audio track, so I have all these audio files, let's say on one particular, let me just select multiple. Okay, So when we do this, we have all these individual files. So if I wanted to make multiple sampler tracks, what I could do is select these events, and then if I go to the audio menu, you can say create sampler track for multiply selected events. And then now we're going to have multiple sampler tracks for each of the samples. So as I come over here, we could do. So again, we can drag all these to a one single track, select the events, and then from the audio menu, go to create sampler track. Another question that we had on previous live streams was about taking multiple tracks and taking them into lanes, and I kind of found a solution for this, so I just wanted to share that. So we'll come over. All right, so let's say I had a new audio track, and let's say I got files from somewhere else, and at this point I'm going to add an audio track, and I take all of these files and I just kind of copy them over top of each other like this, and let's say, okay, now I want to start making lanes from that, but when I go to my lane view, that we see kind of all of the lanes just kind of are still kind of piled, and we could manually drag them, which is kind of a drag. But if we have this open, then we right click, and then you'll see clean up lanes. Now each of the events can automatically be split to multiple lanes so that we can now come over and start comping different parts. So if we drag multiple audio files on top of each other, right click on the track and choose clean up lanes, then they'll all be set to different lanes automatically without having to manually do that. Okay, so I think we got the next question answered already. Okay, so we had a question. My question is there a way to have a key command to open, not toggle, the standard selection of the inspector? And this came when they wanted to take a number of different tracks, and they programmed, I think, Keyboard Maestro to activate like track presets, just free up CPU resources. So one thing that you might be able to do if you're doing that for freeing up DSP resources is just use the enable disable selected track. So if you have you don't necessarily if you want the track to be disabled, you'll see disable selected track, and then you could use a key command to enable selected track. And for this key command, you can come over to key commands, and then under audio you'll see disable enable track, so you could use that as a key command. But if you always wanted to have a inspector tab open, so like as we would maybe click another one like that, this inspector tab can close. If we go to the settings menu here and let's go to setup, we can actually pin. So let's say I'm going to just click on, and I found it's a little strange. You may have to click in another field to tab and then click into basics. Let me just unpin that. So now once this is pinned, as this is open, I go to open up another lane. That lane will always be open for you. So this way your Keyboard Maestro could go over here and just activate, can activate the particular set. So go to this setup here. So select the little setup and then just make sure that you pin the particular one, and that way it will always be open. So when you go to open up other ones, that will always stay open for you. All right, let me check, see how we're doing on time. Okay. And I'll go ahead and paste the live stream link. So let's go ahead and let me paste that again in. Okay, we'll be just moving over to the Zoom meetup in about 10 minutes. All right, and then we had a question about being able to see more text in the MIDI remote, like if it was possible to kind of zoom in and out of the text for the functions here. And there you had kind of a large setup with multiple macros, I think using Touch OSC. So, as you hover over a particular parameter, you could see what, particular parameter is here. So, if we were to have text for, all of these buttons, it would probably be too big and a bit illegible to actually see. So I think that, as you hover over, you'll see kind of what the actual text is. So I don't know of a way to kind of, change the text that's on each of the buttons, and some of the buttons can be small. But, as you hover over, another way is if you go to the mapping assistant, anytime that you would select a particular parameter, or if you click here, you could see, even in larger text, more obviously what the function is of that particular button. So, and if we wanted to take this full, so as we just kind of come over here, as you hit the button, you could also see what the parameter is as you hit the button right here. So as I hit play, that we hit stop, play, so you can see kind of the active function. So you may not need to see it on a particular device, like here, because if you're doing it from like a touchpad controller, you could probably see the text on the actual controller and realize that this is really just kind of maybe the conduit to get it. But if you wanted to see the function, hover over it, hit the parameter, and you could see the function that will be listed right here, or you could just see it in the mapping assistant, which you could always open up in any window from the upper right hand corner. Okay, and it was also a question, what is the point of exporting a MIDI remote script if you can't really, change the text sizes? So why we have the ability of exporting scripts is so that if you wanted to automatically, let's say we wanted to take this particular function, we could export the script to pass it on to someone else that maybe has the same controller, or you could share it with other people. So it's not necessarily like exporting as an XML file for editing purposes, but it's a way of sharing scripts between different users. All right. All right, let me just make sure I didn't get any. All right, so we had a question. Can you go over the undo redo features? I find sometimes it doesn't work depending on which window I'm in. Please demystify the undo/redo feature, when and where to use it. So we can think of the undo stages as being kind of twofold. One is we're going to have an undo for edits. So if I come here, we move these different elements, I do a fade in, I make a copy of an event, this will, show up in our edit history. So we could come over and we can see all of our edits that we've done since we last saved a project. And then we'll have an undo history for the mix console that's independent. So if I come, I move the fader, I adjust EQ, I add a plugin, I wanted to change a parameter in the plugin, let's activate a channel strip, I wanted to adjust the compressor, that now we could have an edit history just for all of the functions of the mix console. So we could think of this, the edit history, as being Control or Command plus Z, and Alt or Option plus Z would be for, and then you could hit the Shift key for redo, would be for the mix console history. So if I come here, I could just hit Alt or Option plus Z, and we could go right back to where we were. So if you accidentally just, moved your mouse and you thought you were somewhere else, and you moved the fader and you totally destroyed your mix, just come right over here. And we could actually see the edit history for the mix console in the full mixer. So we'll just come over and we could see the edit history right here as we go through different tasks. And we say, okay, let's just go right back to where we were. And so that's why you have two different undo histories. All right. All right, let's go back really quickly to, we have a couple more minutes, and then I'm going to paste the Zoom meetup. And again, I'll go ahead and paste that again. So let me just go to my chat field, and we'll be doing this meetup again. We'll be doing our next live stream again, starting in on Tuesdays and Fridays, starting at 1 p.m. U.S. Eastern. I think we'll be going through our daylight saving times in the U.S. this weekend, so it may be in sync with Europe starting next week. All right, so we have Emmanuel checking in from Quebec, Canada. Thanks for joining us. We have PZ136, I see. All right, Mark Winslow. All right, so we just see, would you do it if possible, make Pro Tools Cubase compatible? So really they're, different programs, and we probably have a lot more features, so. It's, you probably can't take a Mercedes car part out and put it into a Kia or something. Okay, so we have a comment. Hi, Greg. I'm under the impression I lose direct offline audio processing when I close a project. Is it because I have a wrong option triggered, or is it normal? Thanks in advance. So the direct offline processing is automatically retained, and you could even undo it afterwards. So if you do the offline processing, it's going to be, if you save the project, it's going to automatically be available for you. So it's automatically saved in the project. And if you do like one process, like 10 years later, you could just simply undo that one process. All right. So PZ136 just asked, is there an oscilloscope in Cubase? So let's come over here to the Supervision plugin. I'll just do a new instance here. All right, and let's say so we could just see our oscilloscope plugin. So as we play. And if you want to change the speed of it, or see just the right channel. So yeah, just it's one of the multiple plugins that's a part of the Supervision metering tool suite. Okay, so you see from Ruiz is Greg, I'm in the track loop independent for the loop. So let's go ahead and so I think you would still need to keep the editor window open. if you wanted the track loop, the independent track loop, to still be looping while the other parts of the project are playing. All right, so we see Franklin's just clarifying. So he says about the queue, question about losing offline processing. I meant the history of it to undo. Sorry if that's detailed. So, it's not in the edit history, but when you go to, if you've done offline processing on a particular track and you go to the direct offline processing later, so say we come over to the audio direct offline processing, that once an event is selected, you'll see all the offline processes here even after the project is saved. All right. All right, so we just see, how did you cut to 8 times or other? So, if we're doing it on a part here, so let's say I want to cut evenly, I could just hold down the Alt or Option key and split, and now we can evenly split different parts. Or if we hold down the Alt or Option key on a long MIDI note, I can come over here and I'll just hold down this Alt or Option plus the split tool, and we could just split that particular note. All right, so we'll take one last question from Soren. Greg, when creating a tempo track and I want to edit the tempo track points on the keyboard, can I move left and right with the arrow keys on Windows, and how to change the value with key command? All right, so let's come over here. Let's add a tempo track. Okay, so let's say I'll just make it a little less here. Okay, so let's say I have these events and I'm going to navigate left and right using, so we can see kind of the selected events that turns black. And then often what I do, is I just will come over here to the info line, and then you could just use my scroll wheel to increment and decrement the values there. All right, so we're going to check time, and I think we're just about ready to start. Yeah, we're a little bit over, so I'm going to transition. I'm going to post the link again, and let's go ahead and transition to the Zoom meetup. And again, this is just a great way to meet different people that are on the live stream. It's always really fascinating discussions. So I just posted the link. I'll go ahead and start the Zoom. All right, and I'm going to go ahead. All right, I'm going to turn on my video. All right, and we'll get started here in just a minute. Let me just go out some people coming in. And again, here's the Zoom credentials. I'll show the meeting invite here. So again, let's see if we have people that are waiting to join. Just make sure the link is working. See anyone sign up yet? Come in. I'll make sure everything is working. Let me jump to chat on my other computer and go to the real-time chat. Okay, we just all right, I'm going to try to start the meeting again. All right, so I see the messages about it's not started yet. I'm going to try to exit out of Zoom. And I'll restart Zoom. Hang on. I'm going to go ahead and post the Zoom credentials. Again, let's see if it's... So maybe if people are looking at the screen... See if anyone else is trying to get on. Okay, so I see wrong link, so let me just email this to myself. Sorry about that. All right, I'm going to paste it in the chat here. All right. All right. So you see Luca. Got it. All right. Sorry about the confusion. All right. We see Gerald. All right. Jenny Shen. All right. See Lawrence. All right. We'll wait. Just all right. All right. Some more people joining. All right. And we'll just keep the live stream going here for another minute or two if people transition over. All right. So we have Jan. All right, so I'm going to end the live stream. Just everyone be patient here real quick. Okay, hang on. I'm just going to type a quick message to some people on the chat. Hang on. All right, so I see Soren's on. Okay, so I'm going to end the meeting on